So for those of you who don't know who Alex is, Alex, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yep. So basically, I'm the founder of Alex Self Fitness. Okay, I run a program called the Elite Performance Program. Basic personal trainer that's been running on the gym floor for a number of years, who transitioned onto online about a year and a half ago, 2 years now maybe, and has just been trying to evolve the product, trying to evolve my business, and trying to obviously achieve unreal results for my clients without all the confusing nonsense that is lurking in the fitness industry.
Oh, nice. So to give a bit of background for why I got Alex on, so I used to work with Alex back at our previous employer back in the dungeon in Shoreditch, who he came on as a junior in that gym. And you were there for what? Just under a year, just over a year?
I was just under a year, actually. I think it was actually 11 months. I thought when I left, I was like, oh, bang on a year. But no, I actually think it was just shy of that. I got itchy feet and didn't quite make it to the full year, I don't think.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, and I think I'm not alone in saying a lot of people saying that the amount of potential you had. It's amazing to see what you've gone from and now to now. The drive that you had through then is obviously done really well. So tell us like a little bit about like how did you end up in that Shoreditch dungeon? Like, what's your story from like coming into the fitness industry? Why are you in this industry?
Okay, all right. So first of all, really appreciate that. That genuinely means a lot. So how did I end up there, and sort of what was sort of like the story of obviously getting there? Was first of all, I'd always known that I wanted to be a PT. Knew that since my older cousin was a PT. So since I was young, I always used to like look up to him. So for me, it was like personal trainer was the one without any question. Done a pretty standard route of what PTs do. They'll get qualified, they'll go into their local gyms, maybe a couple of local gyms around them. Then I was set in one for, I think it was about 3 or 4 years now. And I have always been sort of just very aspirational and very, I want more, what's more, like there's more to this, there's bigger and better to anything, whether that be business, whether that's life, and so on. And I think having that sort of always drove me forwards. And anyway, so after working at that local gym for a while now, it was about 3 or 4 years, and I was starting to sort of like set my eyes into London. I had a couple of friends moving in there. I was living just outside at the time. And then basically the story was that actually one of my local clients went for lunch with one of her friends, and she had already achieved fantastic transformation at that time. And it turns out that her friend was the sister-in-law of the CEO of the previous company that we were at. So they hadn't seen each other for a while. I had already been speaking to my client at this time about making that shift, about, I want to work in London. I think it'd be really, really cool to work with sort of like these elite people, these high-end performers and so on in like a really cool private gym. And then it was purely just fate that was the circumstance. She went to meet with her friend. Her friend was like, oh my gosh, you've lost so much weight. What happened? Obviously, my client then gave me the backstory of me, and then went in, because we were quite close as well. So she went into the story of how I wanted to work in London. And then the friend was like, funny you should say that. My brother-in-law actually owns a huge company who's got multiple locations based in central London. Can you do you want some more information on it? So, and then that's sort of like, that's where it all started, to be honest. That then came back to me, and then I was very hesitant at first. I was massive imposter syndrome kicked in. But yeah, I just thought, fuck it, let's go. Let's just see what obviously can happen. Applied. A few months later, I had my first day.
So I mean, like, how long were you in the industry before you applied for the job?
So, that gets me thinking. I think off the top of my head now, it was a while back. Off the top of my head now, it was about 3 or 4 years in the personal training space. I think it was close to 3 in the personal training space. Before I was a PT, I was actually a gymnastics coach as well. So again, going back to that background of I've always been coaching since I must have been about 6 years. Even before that, I think it was since I was about 15 or something like that. I was coaching. So that was where it all sort of like started, for sure. Was gymnastics coaching, come through, done the qualifications, personal training in my local for 3 to 4 years, and then that was when we made the shift into the city.
Yeah, because I always feel like, you know, I love that phrase of like, luck is just hard work meets opportunity. So like, yes, in a way, it almost fell into your lap with everything that came off, but you had to be in the right place to apply for that, to the right place to get that job, and the right place to move on. And it's amazing when you look back at things that often, you know, sometimes things don't work out. We've had these conversations, especially about me recently, but it's things that I'm not a big fan of things happen for a reason, but I do think people seem to come into your life, or opportunities come into your life at the 100%. Right time when you need them.
100%. And I think it's so important as well. Like, I'm very much a yes man when, okay, actually, I'm going to retract that. I'm a yes man when it comes to opportunity that is in line with your goals. I'm also a no man if it's something that is outside of your goals and it's not aligned to what you actually want to do. But the main point of what I wanted to make on that is go forwards. If it's something that is quite daunting and quite scary, but you know it would actually be fucking awesome. I don't even know whether I can swear on this, by the way.
No way. Is that right?
Excellent. So as I say, if you know that it's going to be fucking unreal, but it's scaring the crap out of you, that is probably the best thing for you to go running headfirst into. So I'm all for, yes, luck is sort of like made, because I was already getting those thoughts. I want to be in London. I was doing the research. I was looking at the places. So I would have put my foot forwards. And actually, if that circumstance hadn't have happened, I probably would have done that anyway. So that sort of like, you have got to have that on yourself. But yeah, it did just, I think, right time, it sort of just happened. And then obviously when that opportunity arose, I could have turned it down. I was doing well where I where I was, but as I say, I knew that would have been a fantastic opportunity. So I had to get out of my comfort zone to go for that.
Yeah, I love that. It's another phrase. I somehow remember all these phrases today for some reason, but it was Richard Branson. I think it was my old boss, me being starting off in a Virgin Active. They always say, like, if you get a really good opportunity, say yes and work out how to do it later. And I think that's followed me a lot in a lot of my career. Like when I first took the job at you know, obviously say it at UP, I lived 2.5 hours away, more than that. Yeah, 2.5 hours away from the gym. I couldn't afford a place in London. So I literally did a commute back and forth, 2.5 hours each way, 6 days a week. Get back at like midnight, get up at 4, repeat, rinse and repeat. And that was horrendous. Like, never again. But I wouldn't be here in Hong Kong if it wasn't for that. I wouldn't have the business I had. I wouldn't have the contacts I have, the friends I have, the network I have, if I didn't take that leap and just work 100%. Out how to do it on the way, like fail forwards.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. I think nothing's made easily. All the overnight successes and whatnot, all the businesses, all the big transformations that you see within people, that all the people see is the change, and they see the people on the pedestal. They do not see the climb up to that, whether that be clients achieving a fantastic transformation that have been working at it for 2 years, or whether that be obviously with the likes of ourselves, going through the early starts, the late finishes, the commutes, the stress, and all sorts that comes with that. Don't forget there's highs with that as well. We had some obviously fantastic memories along the way, which is important. But for sure, like you don't get to somewhere that is quite admirable easily.
Yeah, I think there's like sort of shifting us on to sort of the topic we had at hand, and I think that there's a big part of that will relate to this. But I also think I want to come back to one point you said earlier about, you know, when you almost had that hesitation whether you should send that application in because of imposter syndrome. How was like going from a commercial gym into what was a very, very serious results-driven personal training gym? How was that first day or first week? How did you actually feel when you got there?
Fucking terrifying. That's like, yeah, like as I said, overwhelmed, was like nervous, sweating, walking in, was thinking, oh my gosh. I remember on some of our trainings, mostly led by yourself, fantastically led by yourself, but coming in and thinking that you are the smallest of fish that you could possibly think of in an ocean, is exactly how I felt in that. For a while as well. It wasn't even just for the first week. Like, it was exciting as well. Don't get me wrong. Like, it was a new beginning, and it was just, I'd almost tick that box that if you say that you're going to do something, or you say, are, for example, obviously for me, obviously going specific was I want to work in a high-end personal training facility in the center of London. And then I was walking in the front door of it. Like that was very, very exciting. So like just that you'd actually followed through with that wish, with that goal. But the actual, as I say, the sort of like intricacy of it was terrifying. I was working with a lot of very knowledgeable people that had been in the time, like yourself, been in the game for a while. And I knew that there was work to be done, but slowly through obviously mentorship and so on, you do build confidence in that. And it's like anything that you do for the first time. Pilots don't just sit in the chair of a plane without any form of training or anything, because they're going to look at all the cogs and be like, what the fuck? Clients don't just start up on a program and just boom, they're in. They have to learn the process. They've got to get familiar with exercise. They've got to get familiar with now managing their nutrition and so on. People don't just start a business and then boom, they're up. They have to study it. They have to study marketing, sales, business intricacy, all the admin work and everything. And as I say, that translates over into everything, feeling overwhelmed and out of place and like you're the small fish in a big pond. But that's a really good place to be sitting, I think.
I agree. I've learned to like sort of embrace that feeling. Like there were times where when I ever feel like a big fish in any aspect, that's times where I get and I know this is the same for you. This is times where I get really uneasy. Like yeah. I feel like I'm not pushing forward. I feel like I'm stagnating. I feel like I need to be out of my comfort zone to just push me to actually act when I may not have acted if I were just rested on my laurels.
Yeah. 100%, and it holds you to a higher standard, because when you are the big fish in a small pond, your standard is the high standard to everybody else in the gym. So there's nobody else that's next to you that's a hell of a lot smarter than you, that's a hell of a lot fitter than you, stronger than you, or just doing more of whatever aspect than you. You've not got that to sort of like look up to and be like, because people are very, very competitive. From what I can see, always, whether they're introvert, extrovert, and so on, there's always a little element of competitiveness. So if you're around somebody that is of a higher level in whatever aspect that be, then you are going to want to aspire, and that is going to hold you to a higher standard, because whatever you're doing in your daily routine and so on is no longer the top pillar. So there's room for improvement, and you can see that. Whereas, as you say, when you are the big fish in a small pond, you can't see that, so you don't know that it's necessarily there.
Yeah, and so like bringing back to what you were saying before about that feeling of imposter syndrome, and learning to embrace it being a very, very key aspect in terms of, in a way, of what got you through it. But you also mentioned the term overwhelm, and I think overwhelm is something that's very commonplace with whether it's a big career change, whether it's starting a business, or in terms of what we're discussing more today about starting to get in shape. So understanding that overwhelm is going to be a part of this and getting out your comfort zone. How did you overcome that in terms of moving into the serious personal training gym? And then how do you help clients to start to face that when they come and see you?
I think it's really important to recognize that you're feeling overwhelmed because you're at the start of a journey. And I think when you have that awareness, it becomes way more accepting to feel overwhelmed. It's like you're about to embark on this big thing. So don't be looking at the end result. Don't be looking at the people that are ahead of you. Don't be looking at the big task. Look at it as the journey. And that starts with 1 foot at a time, 1 step at a time. So I think for me, starting off, I knew that I just need to read the stuff that I'd been given, read some of the education, and just learn along the way. Like, know that you're not going to know everything straight away. Not that you ever know everything, but just accept that you are at that beginning stage, I think, is a big, big help. Because when you're feeling overwhelmed, that can sometimes be because you're thinking, why am I not at this level? Everybody around me is at this level. Why am I not there yet? And when you can accept that you're not there yet because you're just not there yet on your journey, fantastic. Then let's start putting the 1 foot in front of the other. Let's start making smaller goals, smaller focus points. So obviously for me, if we're obviously going to bring it onto me, and obviously my entry into that business was just learn one piece a week. And then over time, over 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and so on, I'm then going to get really good. And I'm going to broaden my knowledge, and I'm going to feel less overwhelmed, because overwhelm generally comes from sort of like a lack of understanding and a lack of knowledge of what to do and a lack of clarity of what to do. So then if you take single steps towards knowing what to do, then that then soon goes.
I love that. And I think, you know, going into lack of clarity being a really, really big one. I know the times in my life that, you know, I'm at some point soon, I'm going to go and get checked out to see I've got ADHD. That's something that I've done a lot of research on, and I've realized it's every time I look at a video talking about it, I'm like, okay, that's me. And as you can imagine with that, I've got periods where I have hyper focus. I can sit at a laptop until 2, 3 in the morning and be like super focused, doing tons of work. And then I'll have the most basic beginner training program and I'll procrastinate for like 20 years on it. I'm like, that's almost frustrating because I almost know the potential I have and I know how far below, you know, behind it. And like, I think the times where I procrastinate the most is often the times where I've lacked clarity. I've lacked knowing exactly what that first step is. And it's not, I know where I want it to be. I just don't know what's next. And I think when it comes to clients getting in shape as well, it's like, as you said, they see the pedestal and they just don't know what's here.
Yeah. They and we can obviously relate this to ourselves and clients as well, but you overlook the process. You're looking at the result. You're looking, obviously, if we're talking about us, obviously, like the business result, where do we want to be? What is the target? And for clients, obviously, we're looking at the physique. Where do we want? Is it the abs? Is it the chair? And so on. And if we've got 40 kilos to lose or whatever, and you're looking at yourself, obviously, on that pedestal, but you've put a cover over the roadmap to get there. And that's when you can feel overwhelmed. Whereas you need to focus on the action point, find out what the action points is and what the plan is to actually get there. Obviously, it's important to understand what the end result is so that you know what you're shooting for, but now you need to actually understand the roadmap to get there. And that is where your focus needs to be, not when am I going to be at this end result? And that goes for clients, that goes for us in business. I think that goes for everything. You've got to focus on the process and not the result.
Yeah. I mean, I that's, it's often when people talk to me, because anyone, you know, who's watched this and has looked at my Instagram, who knows me personally, knows that when I get dialed into a diet, when I get dialed into a shoot, I get very, very lean. You know, I'm one of the, you know, probably one of the leanest people never to have any interest in stepping on stage. You're like striator glutes and never going on stage. It's a bit of a waste, really, but I just don't feel that being in a tight, you know, covered in Ron Seal and a pair of tiny pants is my way I want to spend a Sunday. But no, I mean, like, you know, tiny pants maybe, just not the Ron Seal.
Better.
Yeah, and people have asked me, like, well, how do I stick to it? And it's like, I find the first week and the last week of dieting hardest. The first week, I'm changing habits, and the last week, because it changes. You know, I'm thinking, I can have a donut on Sunday, and it starts becoming real. But in that middle point, it's just like it's in the back of my mind, but I don't even think about that. It's like, what am I doing today? What are these steps that almost seem too easy, but I need to do them, and I need to do them consistently.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, you know what you need to do. You know what you need to do on those days. You know that you need to track your macros. You know what your macros are. You know what your training is that you follow in, and then that what you've just said there doesn't stress you out, because do that day in, day out, and slowly you're going to get to the result that you're targeting. So obviously, when we're talking, whether it obviously be business, a client result, and so on, having that clarity completely wipes the overwhelm, because you know what to do day in, day out. There's no guessing. The overwhelm, I think, comes from just trying to guess the process and understand, not having an understanding of how to get to where you are wanting to get to.
So, like, interesting question here. Do you think that people coming into this process, and I'll explain what I think about this, do you think they oversimplify what the process needs to be, or overcomplicate what the process needs to be? Because I sometimes feel that I can make an argument for both. Like, when you come into a gym, I found people to get really stressed out when they can't squat immediately, or they can't hip hinge immediately, and they get almost disheartened and disappointed when they can't do it. And the way I always look at it is like, you wouldn't expect to learn Spanish in a day. You have an audio, you've had an audio book, and then eventually you sort of learn how to do it until you're fluent. You wouldn't just throw someone in Spain and they just get it straight away. Yet people expect when they come into the gym that it's such a basic thing to do or dieting is just the best thing to do, why can't I do it? Do you feel you see that more, or do you feel that people tend to overcomplicate what's necessary?
I think I see both, to be honest. I do think I see both, because I think obviously when people come obviously into the journey and they don't understand obviously how to train effectively and so on, then yes, there is absolutely that analogy which has stuck with me since you said it when you were mentoring me and so on. Okay, I think that is a fantastic way of looking at it, because that is such a good perspective, because people understand that straight away. And it's obvious. If you were to try and learn Spanish for the first day, of course you're not going to be able to do it. But as you say, why then do you then get frustrated if you go into a gym and you can't squat straight away? It's exactly the same concept. So I think people get frustrated at that for sure. And that obviously needs to be simplified. But I also think people try and overcomplicate it because they don't realize actually how simple it can be. And when you're trying to guess, it's almost a case of, oh no, it can't be that easy. Like when I'm talking in my content about nutrition, sticking to your calories, obviously tracking out your macros and so on, following a clear and concise plan, training plan, doing your steps, getting good sleep, that's pretty boring. But if you do that, that is what's going to get you to a result. It's not all this complicated stuff that you need to be adding in, because when there's complexity, it just puts like blurred lines. It gives you lack of focus on what to actually do when you've got 10 things to focus on. Whereas when you've simplified the process down to the complete fundamentals, and you're focusing, as I say, on the simple things, and you've only got 3 or 4 lines to follow, fantastic. You can do those at a much higher level, which again, even if you're doing it not so much of a higher level, it's going to steer you towards your goal. And you're going to have just more clarity and structure in what to do and how to actually get there. But as I say, relating it to obviously clients, I do think through lack of understanding, which is totally fine. It's not their job to be a personal trainer. So don't expect to fully understand the process. That's our job. But if we're trying to go at it alone, then don't try and complicate the process purely through lack of understanding of what to do. It doesn't need to be that difficult.
Yeah, I think that there's 2 really interesting points you brought up there, and like not understanding the process, not expecting to. But I think it's I put up a post about this today. It's like I never get the coaching methodology where coaches are hesitant to give their knowledge away to a client with the assumption that you want the client to need them so they never leave. Like I've always said, my goal with anyone is to get them that they don't need me, but they want to stay because they want to learn and grow, and they become like enjoying the craft. And I think talking about that sense of like overwhelm and people not understanding the process, I think linking that back to you and seeing your story we're talking about from the other side of this, being the experienced guy that was already in the gym when you arrived there. One thing I very much noticed about you is you didn't hide from it, you didn't run away from it, you didn't worry about feeling stupid, and in turn sort of just stay confused and stay lacking clarity. You always ask questions, you always put yourself out there to find that path. Like if you had a bridge with slats down the middle of missing, you wanted to fill those gaps. So in your business, when you've got clients that are, because you work entirely online now. So, and I've seen this online too, you get people that are brilliant at that and always ask questions and want to understand more. And you'll get the people that if they do get overwhelmed, they sort of disappear off into the shadows. And when you're one-to-one, that's quite easy to, let's have a conversation, let's sort this out, let's make sure you're clear. How do you translate that into an online format where you make sure your guys understand everything that they need to do?
100%. And that's a really important point that you've made there as well, because it does happen. It does happen often. Like it is very much a personal characteristic to have the ability to ask questions, to reach out when you know that you actually need it. I think sometimes I can do that, sometimes not. Like, as I say, you know me as being sort of like the student. I like to always sit in that seat, no matter how much I learn and how much I know. I always want to sit in the student seat because, and asking questions constantly, as you know, I was always asking questions because, and this is something that you said as well, there is no stupid question, because if you want to ask a question, that's because you don't understand it. So it isn't a stupid question, because if you're just going to sit through it and you're just out of fear of sounding silly, you're not going to understand it. So then that there is a stupid move if you're not going to do that, because you obviously won't get to that end result. Now, for clients that feel that way, I think spotting it online is actually quite easy, because it's, as you say, they do go into the shadows a little bit. Communication was a lot higher beforehand. Adherence on the program was a lot higher. Things start getting a little bit dropped. Lack of participation in group calls, things like that. It does flag up quite quickly. So that would be, from a coach's perspective, a trigger for me to reach out privately. And I talk to all of my guys, obviously privately as well, but actually call them out on that and say, I can see that adherence is dropping a little bit. Is everything okay? And then that is when we have a mutual conversation, of which they say, actually, I've been feeling a little bit overwhelmed, or I've actually not really been understanding this part, of which I say, perfect. I'm glad that we've now got to that. So now let's address it, of which always they feel fantastic afterwards, because they now understand the problem that they've been trying to hide behind, or not necessarily hide behind, just been nervous to actually reach out to ask for. Okay. Because obviously us as coaches, we know that if all clients was to ask questions whenever they needed to, client sort of like results and everything like that would be at 100%. But sometimes they will shy away, because through lack of confidence in just asking when they actually need help and reaching out when they need help. So I take that upon myself to do that when I spot sort of like those red flags. And that would come from lack of communication from beforehand, lack of participation in sort of like group circumstance, like in the group chats, in the group calls that we have, and so on, or certain metrics aren't being filled out because they are withdrawing themselves from the process. And that's purely come through just that initial feeling of overwhelm, and then they'll back off. And then where they then back off the program, and then that sort of like just downward spiral from there.
Yeah, and I'm in a lot of groups. I'm like you in the sense I always want to put myself into the student's mindset. Like, I spend a lot of money, a lot of time on my education, work with some great mentors, and because of this, I'm in a lot of Facebook groups. And like I still get this day that the next level up in terms of whether it's a coaching group or a business group that I come into, in that sort of feeling of overwhelm and that feeling of almost imposter syndrome being in the group, you almost that like, do I ask a question? Is this going to be stupid? And we get it too. But I realize when you spend time looking at these groups, and you've got people that have been in the industry twice as long as me asking questions that I would think, oh, that's commonplace. It's like, yeah, it's actually like, if something is concerning you, there's probably somebody else, at least one other person thinking it. So it's always worth asking.
Definitely. And I think it just comes down to, as I said before, look, if I don't understand something and it's stopping me from getting me to where I want to be, I'm going to ask the question. I'm going to find out the answer, because the faster you do that, the faster you get the answer. As soon as you get the answer, then you can implement that into your schedule, into your plan. And then as soon as you've implemented it and you take action on it, you're going to get to your result sooner. So all you're doing is delaying the result and delaying that end product when you are not asking the questions when you have them. You're just holding yourself back. And there is no shame in asking questions. As you say, people above you, people above me, we're always asking questions. And then we'll see that and be like, oh yeah, I've thought of that. That was actually really useful for me. They asked it. And these are the people that you're looking up to. So it just fast tracks where you want to get to when you're asking from the people that have walked that path already. They've got the answers for you. So don't try and sit in your lane and think, and sort of sit in the shadows more, should I say, and just try and figure it out yourself when you don't know the answer, because all you're doing is actually, as I say, waiting, and it's just, yeah.
I sometimes think as well, these stupid questions are actually the best questions, because you mentioned this earlier on that, it's like sticking to your nutrition, getting some sleep in, making sure you're training, and you say it yourself, it's quite boring. So people tend to want to skip this step in route of the sexy stuff. What's the supplement I have? What's the training methodology I can have? What about low carb? What about fasting? What about keto? I'm like, have you tried being in a caloric deficit? And like some of those, like we all fight for diets, like which one's better than this one? But no one ever talks about what's the same in all of these things. And I think like often, because people skip the basics so often, those simple questions that you think are stupid are the ones that are needed to be answered the most. Do you find that in your group?
Yeah, 100%. I do. And it always helps the other guys as well. When somebody finally does reach out, there's always 3 or 4 that are like, oh, yeah, that's okay, perfect. And that means that they were all thinking it. Okay. So obviously, as a coach, it's my duty to try and flag up these questions and try and think of these questions. But it's also my duty to make it very, very neutral with the coach and client relationship, in the sense of let them understand that there is no stupid question, and that they feel a complete safe place to ask whatever question they have whenever they want, because it's always going to help the others, and it's also going to answer their question as it is, which is obviously going to push them towards their result faster. And I think they don't ask sometimes out of intimidation. So if you're then going to make a conscious effort on, like, for example, one of my webinars, we spent a good 15 minutes of me purely going through, being like, right, what are your struggles? Tell me right now. And I want something from all of you. Like, I didn't actually give them the option to not give me one, because everybody, and then that is where the questions then obviously formulate, because obviously it's on a certain subject. So then if I can identify what that subject is, whether that be nutrition, training, sleep, that they've been struggling with, there will be a question that goes alongside that, of which that was my then follow-up. And I'm asking for the questions from them. So then, as I say, give them the green light to just ask.
Yeah. I think if you look at, like, it's all about sort of breaking it down, some of these, what we call stupid questions, to, well, what is the minimum effective dose? What is the least I have to do to get the result? And if I can master these, I can layer it up if I need to, but I can always fall back onto these basics. And I like to do parallels back to your career. I remember the, talking about often 15-minute tangents. I remember the, you know where I'm going with this, don't you? I remember that meeting where I went on about a 20-minute rant on about getting a hobby, and how that meeting resonated with you. And I think that was a similar thing of, trying to do everything, trying to be like, master everything. It was like, okay, what is the basics you need to do? And I remember saying, I can't remember the quote. I even quoted myself back in the day with it. But I was like, it's always, it's to be able to be the best, you think you need to know everything, but you actually need longevity. Longevity comes with experience. And similar thing when you're looking at clients with dieting, it's like, yeah, you can do everything now, but you need to be able to stick this out for like 20, 24, 25 plus weeks. If you burn out in 4, you're not going to get there. I'd rather do half of what you're doing now, but be able to stick it out for the long haul.
Definitely. I think that a little thought that sort of just sparked off of that is something that I hounded with my guys quite often, is that you've got to serve yourself first as well. Like, it's all well and good doing all of these tasks, hitting that nail on the head constantly, showing up, being consistent on the tasks that you've got to do, but you've also got to put yourself into a position to be able to stay that consistent. So if that means that you've got 5 tasks that you're completing throughout the day or whatever, but you're neglecting your sleep, you are neglecting time to be putting into your planning and to go through your schedule, to factor in when you're going to train, when you're going to do your meal prep, when you're going to go and do your steps. If you don't do those things, you're not going to put yourself into a position to then tick those boxes, if that makes sense. And a big one for that comes down to sort of like sleep with my guys as well. And sometimes, like, I work with a lot of busy individuals, they'll be getting very, very late nights, they'll be stressed out and so on. And then they will expect themselves to be feeling great in the day and feeling energized. And they'll get annoyed when they're hungry, because they're like, oh, come on, like, I'm doing really well at this, I'm trying my hardest, blah, 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 blah. But they're not associating that with serving themselves first, going to do something that they enjoy on the weekend for energy management, making sure that they're looking after their sleep, so that the next day, like, energy wise and hormonally and so on, your body is prepped. You feel good to then complete the more physical tasks, like nailing your training, like nailing your nutrition, going out for your steps. If you're not going to put yourself into the position to be successful, to tick the boxes, you're going to find ticking the boxes a huge task constantly, and very much like an uphill battle.
Yeah, I think that's especially with sleep, that's such a key one. I can't remember who said this to me, but it was, a lot of people think of staying up late to get work done as getting extra time in the day, when actually you're just borrowing time from the next day. And I would further that and say, I reckon you're borrowing time from a couple of days. So to give a personal story with this here, so on the current business mentorship that I'm on, and one that Alex has gone through as well, is there's a Wednesday night call, which is 6 p.m. UK time, I think it is, but that's 1 a.m. here in Hong Kong, right? So I don't do many of these live. But I said to myself, I'm going to do one of these a quarter. And I had an early client cancellation on the Thursday. I'm like, right, this week is going to be the one where I stay up. I'll do the first 45 minutes and then I'll drop off and go to sleep. And I got into it and I was up at 3 o'clock in the morning, but then I'm wired with ideas and I fall asleep at 4. I'm up at 8. And like, there was that day, that time was borrowed. And it was worth it in this instance, but people do this on a regular basis with stuff just to get ahead. Yeah. Right? Rather than like going, I often say to people, put the work non-negotiable in, not the extra credit stuff, not the stuff for your raise or your promotion or your bonus. What is the stuff that you need to do to make the contractual obligations that you have? Put that in first, and then put all the other stuff in your life, your social life, your date night, your training, your food prep. And then when you've got that, then you know how much time can I then add to extra credit work, rather than doing all the extra credit work at the expense of the whole of your life. Because for me, yesterday and a lot of today was a write-off. I didn't train on Thursday. I planned to. I was like, if that was me one night, imagine if that was me 3-4 nights a week.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it will make you sort of, and this goes for obviously yourself, it goes for me. I know I've certainly had that as well. And I know it goes for clients as well. It'll make you procrastinate on what you know you need to do when you're feeling that way. And then you'll get annoyed at yourself for thinking, why am I not doing the things that I know I need to do? But it's actually because you're not serving yourself first and you're not looking after your energy. Because if you do that, and as I said, you put yourself into a position to do the things that you know you need to do. So you don't actually have a right to get annoyed that you're feeling hungry, or you don't have a right to get annoyed because you missed your training session if you are not putting yourself first. Like, as I say, it comes a lot down to the energy management, and you've got to look after that, because if you're going to run yourself on the red line, consistency is not going to be there, and then longevity is not going to be there. And if you can't stay consistent over time, whether it be with anything, business, physique, achieving transformation, you won't get there.
And so with that in mind, obviously, both of us deal with a very similar clientele, and like very, very busy, driven individuals, very much in a way like ourselves. And that's probably why we resonate with those people. So like, there's this obviously mentality of these people have got to where they are by hustling. And obviously that's a massively important part, and it's necessary. But when people coming in to see a personal trainer and they're thinking beast mode, they're thinking hustle, they're thinking hard training, how do you get them to take a step back and make them understand the importance of recovery? Like, how do you make them see that this is worth, themselves is worth taking time for?
Of course, I think 9 times out of 10 it actually goes the other way to that, in the sense of they've come from a very lazy background, and you actually need to install the fact that we've got some work to do. But to sort of answer what you said there, I think coming obviously from like that hustle and making the importance of rest very, very known, they will already understand that, because they would have already gone through periods of their life where they've been burnt out, and it's the same concept. So these people that we're working with, they will full well know stress. They will full well know burnout and tiredness and fatigue. And that comes through trying to hustle without looking at the energy management, without looking at the recovery and the rest time. So if you can then relate that to something that they've already been through, they will get a deeper understanding of it, because they like, fucking hell, yeah. Like, I remember only last week, I was so burnt out. I literally got nothing done for the next 3 days after that. And I needed to really recover and spend the whole weekend just completely relaxing. And it's like, perfect. So people only address it when they reach the breaking point. So, and then what do they always revert to? So I said to my guys not that long ago on a webinar, it was that whenever you are super stressed out and you're burnt out, you're at this point where you're just really tired, what do you always do? It's like, oh my God, I'm going to make sure that I get an early night tonight. Like, I'm going to make sure I'm just going to chill out, just put a film on or something like that and get an early night. That's like their known thing to go to when they've hit burnout. So if you can actually incorporate that quite frequently and strategically, and actually have that in your schedule so that you don't hit burnout, because you know that that is what recharges you to then feel fantastic the day after. Fantastic. Let's do that more frequently so that then you can actually just be a well-oiled machine that can run at a really high run rate more consistently over a longer period of time, rather than not looking after that, run into the red line, not filling the car up with petrol, and actually just completely hitting burnout and running out of fuel. And then you're actually having to have a pit stop. So that, yeah.
I like that analogy. I like the analogy of sort of like, like using the car analogy, hitting the red line. I think that's massively important as well. And you can go further with that in terms of how they're fueling themselves as well, in terms of the nutrition they choose. It's Craig Ballantyne who comes up with never ever make important decisions when you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. And I love that. And I think that resonates with so many people. It's like if you're looking at the reasons why you haven't stuck to your diet this week, right? Oh, I was hungry. Okay, cool. So as any of these other three things happened, oh, I was tired. Cool. Let's look at your sleep, because that's probably the biggest thing. We can work on food volume all you like, but if you're getting 2 hours a night sleep, or are you eating because you're lonely? Are you eating because you're angry? When you start to be able to identify those things, that's where coaching becomes coaching, where you can actually go, right, let's help the real issue here, if it's in your remit. And if not, then at least it's time to find somebody else to help out with this.
Definitely. I recently had a conversation with a client who had been struggling a little bit recently, and we already know, and I've already got it as a red flag of whenever it is that she's coming the week before her period, always struggles with the diet massively. Obviously, a lot of my girls do, but some more so than others. So this particular client that I'm talking about now really does struggle, but never associates it with it's because we're the week before your period. It happens every single month. And then she was basically trying to say, oh, can we change this? Can we change that? I think we need to do this. As you say, trying to make decisions when coming from a bad place. She's coming from tired, stressed, not feeling great because it's on that build up. We know that it's just not her peak week. And she was trying to change the program out of rash decisions, of which I had to make a really difficult conversation, and difficult conversation, just be an honest conversation. I'd be like, no, what we're doing is absolutely spot on. We know what we need to do with regards to the simple steps to get to where we want to get to, but you're wanting to change the program at the moment because we've hit a little bit of a blip on the week that we know that we struggle with. This is the time of which we do not make any changes, and that we do not make any rash decisions while you are in that current state. And I just really had to take ownership of what she was doing, just really lay the line and be like, this is what I've asked you to do, please follow this, because she was trying to go against it, trying to try different things and so on, out of making that rash decision from a tired, stressed out place.
Yeah, I think going off a little bit of a tangent in terms of talking about clientele, but looking at where coaches often overcomplicate things. I think what you did there was really, really good in terms of we're not making any changes. I see a lot of coaches, when we're learning about the menstrual cycle in girls and the science behind it, a lot of coaches look at things like go deep into the science. And I think it's good to know that stuff and understand why. So week before period, you might get these issues, you might find someone struggling, so you need to be prepared for it. But I've seen it where you go, right, during this phase, we're going to have this many carbs and this many fats, and this is going to be a training, and the next week we're going to change it up. And it's like your client 2 weeks ago, talking back to overwhelm, didn't know what a carb and a fat was, and now you've got them 4 diet plans in 4 weeks. And I'm like, that level of complication it's good to be aware of it and see trends, because as you said, some girls may really struggle in this week. Some girls may gain weight the week before. Some girls may gain weight the week off. Some girls may have no issues whatsoever.
100%.
It's also contraception. You got to think in that. And I know a little bit, but I don't know anywhere enough to generally go, this is what's going to happen in week 3. Like who knows? I think it's just coaches trying to sound sciencey.
Yeah. I think obviously you've got a lot, and I would only look up to female coaches for that, because they're going to have a far deeper understanding, because they have it. So they walk that path, and that is what I would always turn to in that respect. I think just a little side thought of what just sparked off the back of that was clients also want to try and make changes out of impatience, and they will be rinse and repeating the basics. They'll be making good progress, and it's steady progress. It's consistent, steady progress. But again, they'll be looking at that end result and thinking, why am I not there yet? I need to make a change. And that is a mistake that I see a lot of people making. I've made it myself in physique and in business, of just being impatient on the process. Don't change the wheel if it's not broken. It is purely a patience game. You just need to keep showing up, doing those things. And I think when people start getting impatient, they start getting frustrated. And then going back to the point that you said a second ago, don't make any changes or decisions when you're in that state, when you're feeling frustrated or bored, or just like you're getting itchy feet on a process. I don't think that's a smart choice to then make any changes on the back of that, unless it's obviously warranted. If something has actually gone wrong, if that wheel is broken, then yeah, change it. But if it's not, and you're just gradually making good progress, that needs to be repeated and not changed, no matter whether you're bored, whether you're frustrated, or so on. Because then as you then get that next little win, that boredom, and that win will come from consistency and time, that boredom will go, because then you'll sort of realign and be like, actually, I am getting better at this. Actually, I am progressing. Actually, my business is growing. Actually, my abs are coming through. But they won't get that if they make a change through, as I said, just getting bored on repeating the fundamentals.
And even if they get lucky and the change works that time, that you don't want to reinforce that pattern, because it might not happen the next time or the time after that. And if every time you panic, you make a change, it's going to bite you in the ass eventually. And I think that's where the importance of coaching comes in, right? And I always like, when I have a real serious diet, not like dieting for a holiday, but like when I'm doing a shoot or something that really means something to me, like, and I'm not saying a holiday shouldn't, like, if you're listening to the holiday
means something to me.
Yeah, I know, right? And I know, and I've done it from really lean for a holiday. But like whenever I had that, it's like the days where I go, oh, I feel flat. And this is often when guys thinking, oh, I'm losing muscle. Like, no, you're feeling flat. It's an inevitable. If you want to get really lean, you have to be flat at one point or another. And if every time I felt flat or I had a fat day, I rammed in the carbs, I would never get there. Sometimes it's good to have that impartial person looking over your shoulder and going, like, either no, stop it, stick to the plan, or yes, you are needing it, you're a bit depleted, here, have your refeed. Because it's not just throwing stuff at the wall on a whim.
Yeah, 100%. And it's, as you say, having that person in your corner that has walked the path, that understands the process, the things that come up, the roadblocks along the way, and how to obviously navigate around them. People have different roadblocks, as you say. When guys obviously diet down, they go through that flat stage where they've lost some weight, but they're not lean yet, and they're like, I don't really look that good. You have to go through that to then come out the other side to be obviously the leanest and most muscular you've ever looked. And as I say, that's the same for females. And yeah, when people obviously trying to run that path on their own and they don't understand that that's part of the process, then that's when the fuck up comes. And then that's when they'll either fall off the wagon because they're bored, or they'll feel like a failure because they're looking flat and they don't know why. And then they will just go against, obviously, that they'll either throw the towel in and be like, oh, that's that then. Or, as I say, get frustrated and think that the process doesn't work.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. And I mean, I don't know if you agree with this, to help like overcome those moments where you start to have that downward thing. I think one of the big things, I think for me, is making sure you double down on your metrics at this time. I think a lot of times one of the biggest mistakes, not so much dieters make when they get coaching, but dieters make before they get coaching. And when you look at things like Weight Watchers and Slimming World and all these things where maybe you do once a week weight, or even like you just look at body weight and nothing else, that metric alone doesn't tell the whole story. Like, we look at things like stall and whooshes when people have stress, and if you just looked at weight, you think this isn't working. Whereas if you looked at weight, photos, circumference measurements, performance, you then go, some weeks, no, you're not. But you know for certain, there's, going back to your point before, there's clarity and there's no procrastination. You know there's a change need to be made. But some weeks, like, look, your weight's not dropped, but look at these photos. Look at your circumference measurements, and like, it's fine. Hold off. This is the best case scenario, because people look at weight, and actually, if you could hold weight, and it won't happen forever, but if you could hold weight, look better, drop circumference measurements, I'm like, fuck, you can't get better than that, right?
Yeah, definitely. I've had 3 conversations this week about that exact point that you've just said there. And all of them self-recognized it when they were like, they had sort of weight was still the same. I could see, and I was saying on their check-ins, the progress was good. Your gym progress is going up. You're getting stronger. You're looking better on your photos. And I actually had to revert back to the first set of photos that they took to where they are now, or even with one of them was actually only from a few weeks ago, which weight had slowed down a little bit, but he's a beginner, right? And obviously being a beginner, your weight, yes, okay, can drop, but your response to muscle gain is going to be a hell of a lot faster, a hell of a lot faster. So obviously with regards to recomposition, weight could actually look quite level, but your physique will be completely changing. And that is only going to be recognized once you have run that course and you have got a few weeks down the line of being consistent and going through the frustration of trying not to get annoyed if your weight staying the same. And then you look at your before and after photos and think, fucking hell, I look like a different person, despite the fact that your weight's not changed. And it is so triggering for people when they are only looking at the weight and something they might have seen a plateau and they'll be getting into a right rut, okay, big rut. They'll be getting very frustrated. And then the other two that I was talking about with some of my clients, they looked back at their photos and they were like, fucking look how good I look. And I was like, exactly. And then that mindset shift like that, literally like a switch has gone off. And then all of a sudden, now they're absolutely smashing it. They're straight back to it and so on. Whereas when people don't look at obviously all the other metrics, which they most definitely are, yes, okay, weight is an important metric, but it's not the only one. And when a client is trying to say go at it alone or something like that, and you are only looking at the weight, that is where the frustration comes, because you're not looking at the other metrics. You're not getting fit. You're not noticing that you're getting fitter. You're not noticing that you're getting stronger, that you're actually feeling more confident because you're getting frustrated that the scales are saying the same number.
Yeah. And I think that's a really like key point there. And I think this all comes down to, it's like setting right expectations from the off. So when I added a lot of videos to my members area recently, and I've started uploading all my weekly webinars, and I look back at some of the old videos I did, and I've got this sort of like, in a way, sort of like intro area, like kickstart area was like best about nutrition, training. And then they're all like 4 to 7 minutes. And I've got setting expectations. I open up the video and it's 16 minutes long. And I'm like, should I chop it down? And I'm like, no, because 90% of the problems I see in coaching come down to poor expectation management.
Definitely.
It's what we spoke about. It's the overwhelm and people not asking questions. It's people expecting that first couple of weeks, they have that big drop, and then they expect like, oh, how many times have you heard this? Oh, my weight's not dropping. And you look at it and go, you dropped 1.5% of your body weight this week. You're got this image that you need to lose 2-3 kilos a week. And like, I always come back with, well, if you did that every single week, you would dissolve.
Yeah.
There wouldn't be any of you left. And I think it's like understanding that, like, when people, you often, like, you're like me, right? Aiming up between 0.5% and 1% of your body weight per week. And how often when you tell somebody, oh, your aim this week is to lose 800 grams, and they go, what's that even? And then you go, 800 grams over 20 weeks is about 15 kilos down.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, on the setting expectations, as you say, on the point that we've just said there, for example, using the example that we said about, if you've said at the start of that coaching journey, you're going to go through a phase where you're feeling flat. Straight away, when they reach that phase, they're like, okay, cool, I'm at the flat stage. And you've actually mapped that out along like a visual graph as well of where they're at. They'll be like, okay, cool, this is the flat stage, and they'll carry on. As you say, if you're highlighting all of the things that are potential roadblocks that they could come up against, if they understand them, and as obviously a coach, you can highlight them, and also obviously how to get around it, and also how they're going to feel at that stage, because we've walked the path ourselves, we've coached multiple people through it, we fully understand it. So for the new people coming in, they should have such a clear and concise plan on the whole journey. That's also what to do. It's going back to the very first point that we made about having clarity. It's not only clarity on what to do, it's clarity on what to expect, on what's coming up, some of the downfalls that could happen, some of the roadblocks that could come up. It's expected. So then when they get to that, they feel like they're still on that journey and they've not fallen off. They're still on the road. They're at that point of the road, which is that, okay, cool, time to work around it, which what we've got content for, which is what you've got me for, and so on. and then let's crack on, because this is what's on the other side of that.
I like that. Like I talked about, I put a post up recently about looking at the phases on my client journey, like climbing a mountain, and like it's similar things. Like there will be bits where it'll bump up, there will be bits that will come down, but it's still on that path to coming up to the top. And then when you reach that top, people get really, really comfortable there. And reverse starting, something we can talk about in another episode. But don't get too comfortable, because you can either fall back down that mountain or you can hike back down that mountain safely. And like understanding sort of like those key things that are coming up, I think is so fundamentally important for, as you say, keeping people on the straight and narrow and on that path. And understand I loved how you said there, they haven't fallen off. It is just part of that journey, and it's necessary.
100%. Yeah, because they will feel like they have. They'll feel like they have. They're feeling negatively towards it. It's not a good phase. It's not a good loss. They're not looking as muscular anymore. Going back to the example, if they were looking flat, they're looking at that negatively. They're not looking at that as part of the journey. So then if you can reframe that, and you can, they know that the girls are going to see fluctuation over their period. They know that if they go out on a weekend on a social occasion, their weight on Monday and Tuesday is going to be up, and they know why. Then and obviously the guy that's looking flat, that's lost a load of weight, that's not quite lean yet, but he's halfway, he is halfway. But if he's looking flat and just not looking great, and he doesn't understand that that's still on the path, then he's going to think that he's doing something wrong, that something is not that's not going right.
And he can't link those two things together, like in terms of like, oh, I'm feeling flat, I must be losing muscle, where he might not link in the same way that you would link, I'm not losing muscle, because look at your training performance skyrocket up. If you're getting stronger, and it's not the first couple of weeks where nervous system adaptations happen, it's like you're getting consistently stronger, you're not losing muscle. Like if we put these two things together, it shows that we're flat. And when you show someone that, you're like, oh yeah, I never put that link together. I just saw scale weight down, I look skinny in mirror, panic.
Yeah. Straight away, disengagement from the program, panic, think that you're doing something wrong. And as I say, downward spiral. Whereas, as I say, setting the expectation that they'll know what to expect if that time comes.
When I think this also brings on to the fact, if people listen to this and wanting to potentially look for a coach, and they're like, how much do you think it's important that someone is like the coach that they're looking for has gone through the process themselves? Obviously, I've already explained that I have. The photo that's going to accompany this podcast shows that you have. But how important was the lessons you've learned from dieting yourself when it came to learning what to do with others?
Absolutely fundamental. Like I would argue that, of course, I'm in the camp of, your coach should be in shape. If obviously you've got like physique coach, he should be in shape, or should have been in fantastic shape himself. And also in the sense of that he needs to have coached a lot of people previously, if he hadn't, got a lot of experience and got some fantastic results. Okay, because quite often Olympian coaches weren't in the Olympics, but that doesn't mean to say that they're not fantastic at their job. Okay, so I do see two lights in that a little bit. But obviously, reverting to your question, relating it actually to me and what did I actually learn throughout that process, and was it valuable? 100%. I learned the most that I've ever learned within my coaching through going through the process myself. That is when I was prepping for my photo shoot, obviously with the physique guys. That is when I've now been looking at my performance, how to elevate my performance, how to manage my energy, how to build a business. Going through those steps and achieving success in those areas is when I've learned the most through, as I say, walking that path. So I think when you're looking for a coach, you should look at somebody that has walked that path for sure, because they are going to understand the hurdles that you came up against. They would have made the mistakes already, so that then they can course correct you and guide you on the straight and narrow, and just not sort of like short circuit your result, just get you there quicker, as in you're not selling yourself short on that. It just cuts out all the trouble, all the hassle, as much of it as possible anyway, because obviously when we're talking about, if we're obviously going to be talking about physique, there are a lot of things that come into this. It's very, very individual to the person, metabolism, hormones, gender, all sorts. So there are going to be roadblocks, whatever that be. But if you're working with somebody that has been through that process, they will have a deeper understanding of how to actually get around it.
Yeah, I would make an argument, and I don't want any strength coaches coming at me now telling me that I'm a wanker, but like I would make an argument that it's more important with a physique coach than it is with a strength coach, and I'll say why. Because with like sports and strength coaches, like you can study and learn the demands of the sport. You might not know what it's mentally like to do the sport, but you can learn the demands of sport. Then you can plan the training around the sport. And while nutrition is incredibly important to get your best, and we both know this, and is fundamental, you don't need to be necessarily insanely neat. You need the demands of the sport. Well, I would say that with the physique coach, there isn't a shut off with a diet. And like, if we notice that we've talked about dieting pitfalls, this has been the topic of this podcast. Where do people struggle with the diet? And at one point have we talked about proteins, carbs, fats. We haven't talked about macro splits. We haven't talked about types of training. We haven't talked about anything like that. Everything has been about things off the gym floor and things that if we hadn't had felt flat, if we hadn't have gotten disheartened, if we hadn't been in a position where we were nervous about asking questions, if we hadn't had coaching programs where we've been overwhelmed, would we know that this was a problem? As opposed to, here's your diet, go. And I think if you've never had the purpose, like, I don't think everyone needs to look like Dorian Yates, but I think having some semblance of muscle and having got leaner, I don't say you have to be show lean, but I think you have to have gotten leaner than 90% of your clients will be willing to or will ever have gone, because then you'll know when it's, you're just flat, come on, you've got this, you're on the right path. And when it's no, stop making excuses, because you've been there and you know both.
For sure. And I think obviously when you're only going to get that through, as a coach, walking the path. Yeah. And actually understanding that is the only way. You can read as many books as you like, study it, but until you actually feel it, which is what everybody has a deeper emotional connection to everything. It's not, words are fantastic, but emotions are always king. So if you've actually got an emotional connection to how that actually feels as a coach, then you've got a much deeper understanding of how to prescribe to your clients and what to actually obviously give to your clients. But I think obviously with like some of the mistakes that I think clients make as well is, as you say, fantastic what you said there about it's not on the gym floor. It's not sort of like about the little things. It's a lot of it is actually about mindset and about lifestyle, not sort of like the little tactics. Yes, it's important, but that's not normally where people mess up. Just like a couple of things that sort of I thought of on the back of that was that sometimes clients don't take ownership of the journey as well. And I think they to sort of like resolve the issue that they might have come up against. So they'll say, oh, I've not had enough time to do this, or I've not been able to do this for whatever reason, X, Y, Z, which is all just excuses at the end of the day. Because if your clients are not taking ownership and they're always looking for an excuse, an external excuse, they're not going to get to that result. And that is what I see happening a lot with people. They will be blaming something else rather than if they actually accept the ownership that they actually need to do the work and that they actually need to do their meal prep or just find clarity on their nutrition. If you don't know what you're doing with nutrition, go and understand it then. Go and seek a nutrition plan that is for you. Get the clarity on what to actually do. Stop blaming others. Stop looking elsewhere, thinking X, Y, Z for all your excuses, because that isn't going to actually get you anywhere. Or like I could say, I've not had time to do this. Make time. If you want the result, then make time. It's not an excuse. If you don't want the result, then great. You can make the excuse for it, but then you don't want the result because you don't want to put in the work to actually get there.
Yeah, and understanding that is also fine. People going back to the hustle thing, people think they have to be, thick skin lean whilst running a multi-million-pound business. And understand, like, life comes in waves and priorities change over life, and sometimes things are dialed up and sometimes things are dialed down, and you very rarely can do everything at once. Sometimes things have got to be put on maintenance mode whilst you push another area of life up. And if you generally don't want something, it's not a bad thing. Let's work at how we can like control this, add some balance in, and then when you're ready to push, we'll push. And I love that. I love that thing about taking ownership. And like some of the things I hear is, one is like you just said, I haven't got time. It's finding time. When you realize it's finding time, like everybody has 24 hours in a day. The Rock has 24 hours in a day. but he gets all this done. So like, how do you have less time? And other things I hear with that, like common ones, is like, I didn't get my steps up because the weather outside was X. And I'm like,
yeah,
are you in control of the weather? And if it rained for the next 6 months, are you telling me that that's going to be the thing that stops you getting in shape? Like walk around the flat, suck it up and go out in the rain. And I don't want to be like, as a coach, I'll try and find ways of making things as easy as accommodating as possible. But there's got to be that point where it's like, if this is really important to you, it's not always going to be fun. We want to make it often fun, and you want to get into it and love it. But like a business, like we both love what we do for a living, right? But if you told me you love every single second of every part of your job, you'd be fucking lying. And like the things you do, like the way I often try to describe that back is like when clients say things like this, like they don't want to do this because it's raining outside, they don't want to do this because it's boring, or they don't want to do X, Y, and Z. I always look at I'll go like, what do you like your job? And like someone will be like a lawyer, I go, cool. So are there parts of your job that you don't like? And they'll say yes. He goes, yes, but do you do it? Yes. Why? And it's like, because the delayed gratification of having to be able to buy nice things and having rent and being able to put food on the table is more important than I don't like doing paperwork. Because otherwise, everyone in the world would just stay in bed.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, there's a few more that I always like those things. Like when it comes to excuses, like when you start to realize that those things are in your control, becomes really, really important.
It is, and it is about taking that ownership, as you say, because I think people need to lean into their issues, not run away from them. And that is what people always do. Whatever issue somebody come up against, they'll shy away from it rather than leaning into it. Whereas obviously, and it's obvious when you put it out verbally, if you lean into the issue and resolve it, job done. Let's move on. But that is never how it goes. That is never how it goes. And I myself can relate to it. I know other people can. When people come up against struggles, that is the part that they will then ignore the most, or just, as I say, back off from the most. Whereas if you can then lean into it, you can then fix it. If you know that time is your issue, don't make an excuse about it. Lean into it. What can you do about it? Where are the gaps? Let's really focus on that issue to then transform that and make it not an issue, okay? Make it potentially obviously a strength, and so on. If it be nutrition, I don't understand nutrition. All right, stop focusing on your training, stop focusing on your NEAT, then lean into your nutrition. Let's get a deeper understanding of it. Let's find out what we obviously need to do to actually keep us on track, because then that is going to fix the problem. And that is, I see so many people doing that, is that they'll shy away from an issue of which will then delay the process, and it's not going to get them to where they want to be, rather than actually leaning into it. And I think it's important to recognize that as a coach as well, to address that and call people out on it. If you know that is their struggle point, because that is what they're not adherent to the most, that is where the focus needs to be. And that's going to be with resistance as well, because they're going to feel uncomfortable with that. And the client will feel uncomfortable with that. And this is why they sort of lean away from it, because they're not confident in it. They don't understand it as much. And that's why people that love their training generally have a much better understanding of training. People lads that love chest and tries, because they understand it more. That's what they watch YouTube videos on constantly. But they hate training legs, but then they say that their legs is a weak point. But then they don't do any research into training legs because they don't like it, because it's uncomfortable.
Yeah. I'll ask you one more, I think, about taking ownership, and I want to see what your thoughts are on this before I say mine, because I want to know whether I'm just a bit of a wanker to my clients. But what's your thoughts when you got a client and on the first week or so they ask for recipes? What's your initial gut feeling when someone says that?
I would initially say to them that people have had too much option beforehand, and that is what has led to overwhelm and lack of clarity on what to actually eat. So obviously that's why I prescribe a meal plan initially, just to give them some framework and some clarity on what to actually eat throughout the day. That will be agreed on foods that they like, but we need to create some form of stability in your nutrition so that we can create consistency, which is then going to obviously lead to some daily wins, which will then build up obviously to an end result. But as I say, with that, the clients that, and another one that sort of, I don't want to come off of what you've said there, but sort of translates into it is when they ask me for when is their cheat meal, and they've only just started.
Yeah.
And I'm like, huh? Say it's the same thing. Like if people are asking for all these different recipes, I think obviously that's because they want to get an understanding of what to eat that's healthy, can be low calorie, and just get some understanding. But when people have had so much option beforehand, that is what has got them to the state that they're in, because they do not know what to do. They do not know where to turn. They don't know what to follow, and so on. So you need to create less options that are still in line with what you like, what you enjoy, and things like that. So then you can actually create yourself a path to follow.
Yeah, I think that you hit the nail on the head. I'm really glad we sort of agree on that one, because it's, if any potential clients or current clients are watching this, you know, it's not just me that feels this way. But I think the recipe thing for me, like, I think when you look at that in terms of, I agree with you in terms of having too much option, but often it's like people going into the diet with that non-taking ownership mindset. That's the first thing, because I think if you looked at their diet before, it's probably some sort of same ham sandwich, couple of take options, and it'd be like some cereal for breakfast, right? There's not more or less variety. It's just different foods, and you sort of want the little bit want the cake eater too. That's one reason I don't like it. One is because I think about people when they ask for recipes, I'm like, people often don't food prep, and like, if you're a stay-at-home mum, and I say a stay-at-home mum to one child who's old past the terrible twos, then be my guest, have all the recipes in the world. But your busy executive lawyers asking for recipes, like, you might be able to keep this level of food prep up for a week. If you've got a new meal plan every week, you're going to burn out, as we spoke about earlier, so quickly. The third thing I think it shows me, we talk about taking ownership. It's like, I don't mind having a client give recipes if they've come to me with 3 or 4, and I'll go, oh, here's another one, try this. But it shows that little bit of a, why can't you go, I'm not a chef. I'll help you. I'll give you some options. I'll give you some spice seasonings. I'll give you food options. But the fact that you can't go and Google a recipe of how to use this makes me worry that you're expecting this to be handed to you. And that's sort of like, but I want to go on to a point you made about that meal plan and bring it back to another analogy we used about training. Remember we used the you wouldn't expect to learn Spanish in a day. This applies to meal planning as well. And any coach should go straight in and giving macros on day one. You know, it's like, because imagine if you're a language coach and you go, I want to learn Spanish. And I go, so should I grab an audio book or a cassette tape, or should I get an app? And it goes, no, just go to Spain. But I don't know Spanish. Just go to Spain. You'll pick it up. And like, this is the macros approach. Like, all the food in the world, just like work it out. And we're now in this thing where coaches, and this I brought this up, I think, on every fucking podcast. It's obviously my thing of 2020. But it's that thing is like, make it simple, take away the decisions as much as possible from your life.
Yeah, 100%. I've recently been setting up sort of like a few people, 9 times out of 10, right? When somebody first comes to me, they don't need to actually track straight away. I'm putting them onto a meal plan of which is structured on good quality foods that I know that are going to be aligned to their goals. And I just need to get some consistency onto that. And they will see a huge change on that. Just because 9 times out of 10 people that come to me have been eating shit previously, they've not been sleeping properly, and they haven't done any training. If you can just fix that, rather than then obviously piling on with these people, right now you need to track, now you need to do all of this stuff. It's fantastic, don't get me wrong, because they move on to tracking, right? But sometimes, as I said, sometimes this is case dependent. Sometimes I do just put people onto completely simple meal plan, because as you say, less is more. Less is always more, because it comes back to the main point that what we keep bringing up, which is the clarity on what to do.
I think as well, we're going into that as well. If you've got that framework, and let's say then you progress someone onto tracking, and then you progress them into being more intuitive with their foods, and they add more recipes then and add more variety, and they do all this stuff. Then if life gets busy again, rather than starting them off with macros and tons of recipe books, and then life throws a curveball, something happens at work, and all of a sudden you can't do it anymore, you fall off and just go, it's too much. and burn out. Whereas if you have that framework and that meal plan, it becomes your way of eating, and then you add a bit of variety and you move away from it, you can always fall back onto that as a default.
I think it's about having those first action steps as well. Like, I've been in multiple mentorships now where I've always got into them, and there is so much content. So whether this be obviously physique and I'm working with a coach, or whether this be a business mentorship and so on, there will be so much content around every aspect that you can think of on that journey. That is very overwhelming. So look at that, and then to think, right, what do I now need to do? It's like going to Spain to just go there to learn the language, rather than actually taking step by step. The bit that I find the most value in is that initial setup call, because that is when I get my 3 to 4 action steps of what they want me to do straight away. That's all I need. Let's just rinse that. So when people obviously come to you and you're like, when can I have my cheat meal? Where's like the recipe books? And they've got all of this content and all of this stuff that they can choose from. They're not going to take action on that, because it's like, right, what way do I turn? What do I have? Whereas when you keep it clear and concise and you go on to, as I say, like meal plan initially, nice, obviously structured training plan. You've sorted out your schedule throughout the week so that you know what you're doing. That leads to action, because you know what to do.
So like, sort of just like to slightly like tail this off into, some of like, we've got the mindset sorted, we've got someone's expectation placed, we've got people now taking ownership. From like, I always say that if there's something that I have been tempted to do, then I bet my clients have been tempted to do it. So now moving on to like the small, silly sort of mistakes that sort of like clients tend to make. If there was a top 3, either a top 3 you see commonly, or these can include stories that you've learned that you found in clients, what would those things be? Like the small, silly mistakes that end up like clients unaware, adding up to big things.
I think the first one is lack of planning. So that is one thing that I do with my guys, first of all, is that they will expect to be able to follow their nutrition plan. They will expect to follow their training plan, but they've not actually planned into their schedule what time are you training. As we say, obviously working with a lot of busy individuals. Okay, cool. So what time are you actually training? Obviously, I'll be providing the training plan, but what actual time in the day are you training? Okay, cool. Now we've got obviously the meal plan as well. So we know that we need to do a meal prep. When are you doing that? Because then when it doesn't get done, then obviously the nutrition plan doesn't get followed. And then that again, obviously leads to bigger problems. So that I would say would be number 1, I think. I would say mistakes. Overlooking. I'm trying. Oh, you put me on the spot here now.
So I go for one, and then you can come back. We'll alternate.
Yeah, absolutely.
One that I always find, like, and I'll tie some of these back to a story. Is certainly for the people at track, is like hunting MyFitnessPal for the most friendly option for something that you want to justify it. Like, I remember going to a restaurant. Often these for me are on mini diets, so I don't do these when I'm on full diet. But on a mini diet, I'm just tidying up, and I haven't got that real why. I remember I wanted spare ribs in a restaurant, and I went through MyFitnessPal. I went, which spare ribs is it? Oh, it's not the 3,000 calorie portion. It's definitely that 600 calorie portion. I'm like, bollocks, was it? I just wanted to justify and fit it into my macros. And like I always say, if in doubt, it's more than you think.
Yeah, 100%. I always say that. I always say pitch for the higher one, just to be safe, because it's going to be a decent sized meal anyway. So it's not like you're going to be going hungry. So always just pitch for the higher one for sure. I think another issue, just sort of tying it into MyFitnessPal, where people don't fully commit to tracking. Sometimes I see they'll track things here and there, and they won't track everything. And there's no point in doing that. That's a job half done. The point of tracking is obviously to understand that you can stick to nutrition targets. So if you're going to track all of your big meals, like the meat portion, your carbs, the drinks that you've had and so on, but you're not going to track the oils, the sauces, the biscuits in between and things like that, then you're going to end up leaving sort of questioning. You'll be like, well, I'm tracking, so what's going on? Why am I not losing weight? Because I am tracking. They're convincing themselves that they're doing the job, but actually the job that they're doing is only a job half done.
Yeah, I think that's such a common one and such an important one. Of like people use tracking almost like the highlight reel. It's like their Instagram page. It's like I'll put all the big stuff in, and then you notice that Friday it stops at lunchtime, and then there's no tracking until Monday, and then the weight's gone up, and they go, "Well, I'm tracking." I'm like, "Yeah, but look at this gap." And like the people like not putting in, as you say, it could be overlooking things like oils and drinks and things that are genuine mistakes, but albeit, you know, like things that we need to nip in the butt straight away. But some of the things is like, and that sort of brings me on to my next one, is going, that's only small, it's not worth tracking. And I'll bring it back to a story I do. When I was dieting, the last photo shoot I had these low calorie dairy blue cheese triangles. They're like 20 calories per one. I used to have like 3 of them. And it wasn't much, like what, 60 calories? It just enough to keep me to the next meal. And I didn't track them. Maybe I should have done, but it didn't affect my progress. It was 60 calories a day. But that is what a client will do with a cookie, because they're not aware of the calories and the portion sizes. And that 300 calorie cookie, it only looks like this, but it adds up to huge things.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I see that often.
For sure.
I see that often. I think another thing that I see quite often, and this sort of comes from people that are coming from the outside that don't have a coach, and that is so like a big mistake that I see most people making is coming back to the clarity on the program. And when I say program, I mean the whole aspect. So they're not following any form of training plan. They're not following any form of nutrition strategy. They're not looking at their schedule and planning when they're going for steps, when they're going to be resting. They're not looking at their sleep. They are just purely making it up as they go along. They're making up their training as they go along, not following any form of periodization. They're just following the trends and doing whatever they feel like. Because 9 times out of 10, I will get somebody on the consultation call with me, and I'll be going into their training. They'll be like, okay, so yeah, I go in, I sort of just do whatever I feel like. Right. Okay, cool. Not going to be seeing any progress there then. Again, nutrition. How can you be making progress throughout following obviously a nutrition plan if you've not got one, and you don't know what targets to actually be sticking to? And no wonder you're feeling overwhelmed, because you don't know what on earth you're doing. And then obviously not looking at your lifestyle aspects, like when are you actually factoring in walks, when are you factoring in time for yourself, when are you going to start going to bed at a normal time rather than being a teenager that's trying to skip an early bedtime. I think that's a big mistake that I see people making. And then it always just leads to frustration. They'll get months down the line, they look the same, even though they've been going to the gym, so they think they've been doing all right. And consciously, I love that one, consciously trying to eat better, which again, they'll get to the weekend, they'll still be having a big blowout. They'll be not following anything, like any form of strategy throughout the week with regards to their nutrition targets or any form of meal plan. And then they get 2 months down the line and they look the same.
Yeah, I think that ties in quite nicely to my final one. And for me, it's people trying to cling to their old way of life whilst trying to improve and get a new way of life. And one of the things I added to my consultation process, when I sometimes do this on sales calls with online, but I certainly do when I have a one-to-one client. It's the first proper session with me, and I'm trying to delve into the why. And that is like, I don't just say, how do you want to look? I have my consult go through a past, future, present model. Past, why are you not happy right now? What do we need to change? Future, where do you want to be? And then present is like, how do we bridge this gap? And like, I go through sales consult lists as well as in first sessions. And in the future part, I used to just be like, how do you want to look? Tell me what body fat you are, any people you want to look like. But then I now go, how do you want to look? How do you want to feel? What habits do you want to have? Because I see all the time and time again, people on a consult call go, I'd love to be that kind of person that gets up in the morning and goes for a run. I'd love to be that person that hikes on the weekend. I'd love to be that person that food preps. Yet they don't do it from day one. They're almost thinking that when they have the apps, they'll all of a sudden be motivated to do the hike on the weekend. I'm like, no, if you want to do that, you need to start now. And the same sort of thing applies when you get to weekends. I see people go, so what's the plan? What's the plan for Saturday? Oh, I don't plan that far ahead. But you're going to have to, because the person who's 100 kilos has 100 kilo habits. The person that's 85 kilos has 85 kilo habits. So if you want to be 85 kilos, start living like that person. And that person will plan to a degree, if not like, especially if you're going all in and trying to get there, really plan. But like to a degree, they'll at least have an idea of what's happening on Saturday. If you're leaving it to chance, it's going to go out the window.
Definitely. Definitely. And I think it will come through experience as well, because you say obviously that person will plan. Yes, they will. But I also think somebody that's in shape year round, they just live the habits. They don't necessarily need to plan it. They know what they need to be doing. That it's not being planned, it's their lifestyle. So you need to be able to adopt that. And I think that's a really interesting point that you've brought up there. And that's actually a little note that I actually had written down, was that people hold themselves to the standards of where they're at, right? So if they're holding themselves to low standards, that is obviously the current body shape that they're in, the current position that they're in with business, the current situation that they're in with anything is down to the standards that they've held themselves to. Whereas if they can hold themselves to a higher standard, which is going to be the person that is in shape year round, he's holding themselves to higher standards. He's not being lazy. He's not letting himself do that, because he knows if he wants to keep himself in this peak condition and with a healthy lifestyle, wants to be fit, wants to stay trim, wants to feel confident and so on, that's not going to come from low standards. That comes from holding yourself at a higher standard. When people come through the door, always the standards are obviously set low. So it's about setting that new frame of standards, and that is where you need to be.
I think that is an incredible point to sort of leave it off from there. I think, you know, like if people leave with that thought of like, I need to set myself a new standard, I think that's a good way to go. So for people who don't know where to find you, where do we find Alex Searle?
Yeah, absolutely. So mainly I'm on Instagram, to be honest. So Alex Self Fitness. Obviously you can reach out, drop me DMs if you've got any questions or anything like that. I'm always in my DMs, just helping people out and so on. Obviously posting up content. 9 times out of 10, I use a lot of the questions that I get as content. So yeah, I'll be Instagram, Alex Self Fitness.
Awesome. And then for anyone that doesn't know, we've already planned to have a round 2 of this to talk more about business. From obviously this one, when I met Alex, he was a trainer. He was the nervous imposter syndrome trainer, got on to become a master at getting results, and now he's really taking his business to new levels. So that'll be a really interesting one not to miss. But thank you very much, Alex. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on, and I can't wait for round 2.
No problem, mate.